used also some analyzation that the FBI used and came to our conclusion that this is 98% matches up to the anatomy of Joseph.
Whoa.
Okay, so hold on. But let's figure out what the claim is here.
Okay.
Go back to that picture right there. Do you think that is indeed the picture of Joseph Smith?
I do, and the timing is very important.
Glory, glory, glory.
He's missing a lot up there on the top of his head.
Yes.
Remember, when he was mobbed, when they put tar on him, they pulled out his hair from the roots, and it never grew back then. Also,
what?
Yeah. So he was always missing part of that. And then also, when they tried to shove the vial of poison down his mouth, they broke his teeth.
Yes.
And there's a slight indentation, or should be, where a scar is.
Oh my gosh, look at this. So you superimposed the pictures of the 3D renderings. You got permission from the church to have exact analog copies made of the death masks.
If you do not see this area that is different, then it's not him. So, well, lo and behold, guess what? It's there. It's the same thing. Lower and flatter.
You're right.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I'm your host, Cardinellis, and today I'm joined in the studio by Shannon Tracy, back by popular demand and loaded up with Ward Radio merch. He's a historian and a forensic expert who's going to shed some light on what Joseph Smith actually looked like. There has been quite a few articles written and quite a few daguerreotypes found over the past couple of years that have been leading to a lot of postulating, a lot of supposition, a lot of speculation as to what Joseph Smith actually looked like. But Shannon Tracy here has looked at all the evidence of all the exhumed bones and bodies of Emma, of Hiram, of Joseph, and basically become the premier forensic expert, would you say, on the physical evidence of Joseph Smith? Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, his anatomy. So yes.
Okay, excellent. And he's going to tell us what Joseph Smith actually looked like. And here to supervise the conversation to ensure that all of us stay within our lane is none other than comedic editor at large, Jonah Barnes. How's it going, Jonah?
It's going great. How are you?
All right. I can't complain. I'm here with Shannon Tracy in our new t-shirt. Have you gotten picked up on anonymously by random cheerleaders while walking through the mall?
No, I haven't been out yet, so that'll happen in the future. So.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Trust us.
It's a future thing.
Okay, cool. I've seen Vicky there sitting in the shadows, just trying to, our security has had to hold her back from wrapping her arms around you and saying you haven't looked better since 1997.
Yeah. So Vicky is my wife. So
yeah.
And a little clarification, Jonah, aren't you also the Apocrypha person there? So we're going to be talking about Apocrypha on all this as well?
Well, you're going to be showing us, some apocryphal photos. Yeah. There's so many photos of Joseph Smith running around. They can't all be true.
No, they're not.
Well, and there's one. Have you seen, before we get started, have you seen the one on eBay going for 90? It's how much is it? It's like, I saw it goes up every time I see it. When I first saw it, it was like 75K. Then it was like 83K.
No,
and then just recently, hold on.
This is crazy. Daguerreotype of Joseph Smith Jr. and wife Emma Smith, rare key Mormon artifact on eBay for $95,000, and it shows like this old wrinkly bald Joseph Smith. It says $95,000 or best offer.
But he's got a tuft of hair on top.
Oh, dude, look at that. I don't know if that's a problem with the daguerreotype or what, but yeah, this thing is going for $95,000.
So let me clarify here right now. Okay. That is not Joseph Smith. It has nothing to do with the anatomy we know is Joseph Smith. It is not.
Oh, you're
him.
such a buzzkill, Shannon.
Yeah,
we were gonna raise $95K from our audience right here, right now, and you just shot it down.
Dude, that's funny. You look hilarious. You look awesome in that shirt. Anybody that remembers your last podcast is gonna think, who's the younger cool cousin of Shannon that just showed up, you know? So, okay. So, really fast, Tell us a little bit about yourself, Shannon. For those that don't remember you from our last podcast, tell us what your kind of credentials are and all these projects you've worked on with Joseph Smith's anatomy. And then let's dive into these very interesting 3D renderings that you've made with old technology that you want to replace that you say is good. Give us the whole 9 yards, man.
Certainly. So I started getting interested in looking for a realistic image of Joseph about 1995. I looked at all the different images that are out there, and I was just really frustrated. I mean, they have them to where they look like a page boy. Some of them even look like Dracula. They're just all over the place. So I thought, is there a way to actually find out what he really looked like? And I one day was staring at the death mass in the Joseph Smith field house. They actually had them down in the basement for a while. And I looked, and I was at that point thinking about getting into 3D animation. This is in his infancy. And I looked there and I said, hey, there's his image sometime while he was here on this earth. He wasn't alive, but they captured it in a death mass. So I thought, I wonder if I get a copy of those and I could scan those in and start to create 3D models of Joseph and Hiram. And that's how it started. And then from there, I got permission to have photographs of the skeletal remains of Joseph and Hiram from, at the time, the RLDS church. And so at that point, we knew that if we could put the death mass and the skeletal remains together, we would then be able to have side positioning of how the death mass would fit on the skulls and actually come up with a much better realistic approach to what would they look like. So remember, this is 1996. Yes.
So Shannon, the skeletal remains of Joseph Smith aren't like in the ground? Like what are they like? Hanging up somewhere? Like how did that come to be?
Yeah. Well, just very interesting. I will walk you through a little bit of the history of the remains of Joseph and Hiram to the point where we actually find those remains. And then we'll go from there with joining the rest of the history of actually creating 3D models of them. So how's that sound?
By the end of this, Shannon, you're going to tell us which one of these eBay daguerreotypes we should start fundraising for, right? That's the goal of this podcast?
Well, sure. Yeah, let's do that. So I will tell you, after I created the anatomy of Joseph and Hiram, and we created some really beginning 3D models, the RLDS Church came to me and asked if I would help them possibly authenticate a daguerreotype that they had found. And so I did promise to do that, and that's how I got in front of my first daguerreotype. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we did to try to authenticate that. Now, since that time, just recently, I think it was 2 years ago, another possible image of Joseph has surfaced. Now, I am intentionally not got involved with that because I really don't want to get involved with that again. And I'm waiting for, there are other things.
Wimp.
Yeah, I know.
Wimp.
Chicken. There are other things that are much more important that I'd like to do, like redo my whole project with modern day technology and actually create more modern 3D animations of Joseph and Hiram and utilize that to do a forensic reconstruction of the martyrdom.
Okay.
So, wow.
So
are you making like I was going to say, you're making like a Pixar movie or 3D animation, or
pretty much, but we won't have Buzz and the Lightyear guy in there. So maybe Woody, but not Buzz.
Okay.
Okay. And when you reference the most recent picture, I assume you're talking about this one.
That is correct.
That popped up in the news,
correct.
right?
So Locke Mackay and Ron Romick, and I can't remember the person who owns it. They're the ones that have done the most recent study. They've done an amazing job on that. I've sat in on that. I congratulate them for the work they've done, but I am not going to come down in one way or another on that at this point.
Okay, so is it him or not?
What part about I'm not going to come down on this? Are you?
I don't care what you come down on. I come to you say, is it him or not, Doug?
So I'm not.
Yeah, right. So which one?
Dude, I gave you a freaking hat.
Yes,
Tell me,
is
it? I just kidding. I just kidding with you, man.
I promised that I would not get involved. It's not my project. It would be wrong for me to step in and steal.
So it's not him. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay, so hit it. Keep going, man.
So let's start by pulling up my first picture. We're going to start in the martyrdom, the day of the martyrdom in Carthage. So why don't you pull up this picture that I have on my screen. This is,
okay, on your screen. Good, yes. Awesome. Okay, here we go.
This is a line drawing of the room, the floor. The second floor of Carthage. And as you see there's the jail room, there's the cells there's the landing, and then the stairs. So after the martyrdom, I'm going to just sneak in one little thing. Everybody thinks it's that John Taylor looked out this window. when he saw the mob.
Yeah.
So he wasn't. He was sitting at window number 1, which is above the door downstairs. That's when he saw the mob, and he ran over to the door. And then later on, when he ran back to a window to jump out, this was the one, not this one. That makes a big difference. There's a lot. It's important to know that, because if you do not know that, you have some very incorrect.
So he was at which window again?
Window number
1.
1, and this is the front of the jail. So the door downstairs is right here. So he saw the mob coming across the open field there, coming towards that, and that's why he gave the alarm, and they all came over there and jumped in front of the door to hold it, because the lock on the door wasn't working.
Okay, rock on.
So now, that night, after the martyrdom, Willard Richards stayed up all night long after he put John Taylor into the hotel down the road and had a doctor work on him. He spent the whole night cleaning the bodies and preparing them to go back to Nauvoo to be presented to the saints. So what does that mean? Well, he washed them. He probably changed their clothes. He bound their jaws. He also packed their bodies in ice and ice water in boxes. Boxes were created for them to do that. And the reason why we know that, and the reason why it's important, because later on, when the bodies are in Nauvoo and they make death masks, they are not bloated and they are not distorted. So they are well preserved. So how do we know there was ice in there? Well, later on, when John Taylor is moved to Nauvoo, they say that to help him feel more comfortable, they packed his wounds in ice and ice water. Now we know there are 3 different ice houses that are found there in Carthage. And what an ice house is, it's a big stone building that usually is subfloor below ground, and they have it packed with straw and sawdust. And during winter, they go out to the lakes, they cut ice up, and they go and store it in there so it will last all year long. And they actually did make ice cream, and they had icy drinks.
That's so intriguing. Okay.
So
Yeah,
then,
think of all the trouble, and we just pop those things in our freezer and.
Well, I just can't believe that there's
ice.
a pit deep enough that you have dug with enough hay and sawdust that there's a cube that would last all summer long.
well,
in Illinois.
yeah,
you know,
and it was very hot then. But most people actually had buildings outside that they called coolers, and they were dug below, and they were lined with brick, and they would actually put their milk and everything else in there to keep things cool. That was a refrigerator. So a person that had wealth or immoderate means, they would dig one of those, and that's where they stored their vegetables and their meats and other things so that they would not be bad.
Okay, cool. Wow. So what you're saying is that the body was stuck in ice, and that's why this daguerreotype in this medallion represents.
You're not going to get it from
Joseph Smith. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, you heard it here.
You're not going to get it to me. So real quickly, we're going to go through some pictures of the jail upper room. Now, this room here, if you show that, this is the window that Joseph dove out. This is actually the jailer's family room. That's where they stayed when they didn't entertain, Joseph Smith and other people. Then this is a window that is looking out, that side window where Joseph dove out of. Then from this one, if you see, this back window here is window number 1. That's where John Taylor was sitting. If you notice, the window ledge is very wide. It's over almost 2 feet plus. So it's very large. You don't just fall out these windows because they're very, very hard. And that's the jail where John Taylor was placed for a while Willard Richards distracted them so they wouldn't. He thought he was going to be killed, so he put John Taylor in this jail area and put a mattress over him with some mattress. And later on, when the doctor was trying to clean him up and fix him, they kept having to pick out the straw that was stuck in his wounds. So that's
they put him there, Shannon, because they were afraid the mob might come back.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Yeah, that's
correct.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So that's looking out of that jail down the stairs where people came up, where the mob was coming up through there. And it's very narrow. If you think anything about those stairs, a mob is maybe 12 people, and most of them are on the stairs. You may get 4 on there.
Okay.
So this is the Hamilton house where John Taylor was left with the doctor. That's also the same place where Joseph and Hiram and everybody else stayed before they were moved over to the jail, the days before that. Then there's John Taylor.
That's Willard Richards.
Oh, you're right. That's Willard Richards. Yeah. Apologize. See, I knew you were going to be there to keep me straight.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to show you a few pictures. This is a 3D model of Joseph Smith and the stars represent the wounds that he had on his body. So we have one center mass in the heart, one a little bit higher up. This is actually considered a wound, not a gunshot. The doctor says that. Possibly when he fell out, he broke his collarbone. This is a shot through and through where he actually got shot from the backside. And then this is a grazing shot.
Wow.
So I'm just going to say what everyone is thinking. Joseph Smith is looking fit.
He's looking real good.
Am I right? He's looking buff.
Maybe I should have put like a loincloth on him. I don't know. So.
Yeah. That's funny.
And then this is Hiram. Hiram had a shot that they know was a through and through from the nose to the chin. We haven't yet discussed whether it's up or down, but that was there. Then also there's a grazing shot on his chest. And then this shot is actually a shot through the back of his, from his back through to the front. Now, we don't know whether or not this actually penetrated, but we know that it hit the pocket watch that was in his front and shattered it. It just blew it to pieces. And then this is a grazing shot.
Well, and also when you say this, it looks like on OBS, it doesn't show your cursor. So maybe you should just describe. Maybe you should just describe which one it is.
The nose shot through and through in the chin. That's one shot. Then there's a chest shot right there. You see that one? That's a grazing shot. And when we actually examine his shirt and his vest, and we'll show that later on, the vest is kind of torn apart there where it grazed that area. And then you see one in his lower abdomen. That's a shot that went from his back through his front. And it's pretty much a straight through shot, but we don't know from the description from the coroner whether it was a through and through, but we know that his pocket watch that was right there in that same area was shattered by the impact of the velocity of the bullet going through there. And then there is a grazing shot on his right thigh and another grazing shot on his knee. The question is can you put his body in a place where some of these line up? Possibility. This is
it sounds like a hail of bullets, for pity's sakes. Like they've all got like 5 wounds each. Like good grief.
And John Taylor had 5 wounds as well. Now this is a copy of a version of the death mask. It's not the one that we've used and that we have. This one here had the chin repaired. The one that we have actually is original, and we can see that on the bottom here, on the bottom of the lower right chin, there's a mark that shows where the bullet.
It looks a lot like that guy, wouldn't you say? Like
you keep pushing on it.
I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Watch his face. See his reaction. We'll be able to gauge by the reaction.
Yeah, we're literally up next is going to be a body language expert that ends up analyzing your reactions to all of these pictures, and then we will have definitive proof.
Right.
Shannon Tracy endorses.
You're in the Daguerreotype cult or you're not. All right, keep going, man. Keep going.
So when I started thinking about my project to create a 3D model of Joseph Hiram, I knew that I needed to get a copy of the death mask, and I wanted it as original as possible. So I contacted Glenn Leonard. He was responsible for the Museum of Church History and Art at that time. And I called him up, told him a little bit about what I want to do, and he's fascinated with that. And he said, that's pretty cool. And I said, well, what can I get a copy? And he said, well, write me a letter, ask defining what you want to do, and I'll see if I get permission from the brethren. I went, oh boy, brethren, I'm not going to get that. So I wrote my letter, sent it up to him. About 2 months later, I hadn't heard from him, so I called him up and said, hey, Glenn, where do we stand? He goes, oh, are you calling me to come pick up your copies of the death mask? Because he thought that I was. I go, no, I'll be right down there. It's like 4:00. Can you hang around? It's only 2 hours from Provo. So I ran up there. He had them in a box, and they were still warm and moist. They had made them from the original casting. And I was always so indebted that they were fresh. I mean, if death masks can be fresh, these guys were fresh.
Wow, cool.
Whoa.
Okay.
Wait. So you got permission from the church to have exact analog copies made of the death masks from the original death masks?
So they weren't analog because there wasn't any digital. They were real physical.
I mean, by analog, I mean, it wasn't like 3D printed with plastic.
No.
It was set in there with old school
they poured
plaster.
Brand new plaster in the molds, and these came out.
And you got permission from the brethren to have those made just for you.
Well, that's what Glenn said. So I say yes. So
okay, so either Glenn is an epic bureaucratic Chad who just went rogue and just did it. Either he's an epic church office building bureaucrat that there needs to be an award for, okay? Or Or like, well, this is pre-Mark Hoffman before everybody freaked out, right?
No, this is post Mark Hoffman.
Okay, then freaking let's get those brethren back. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I will tell you, if there is a man that deserves to have a history written of, is Glenn. I mean, he has stories of what he's seen and what he's done forever. Amazing man.
Now, Shannon, be honest. Did you, when you were asking the brethren, when you wrote your letter that eventually went to the brethren, did you mention that this was for Ward Radio?
Oh, of
Do you think
course,
that
yes.
put them over the top?
What happened is I got with Mr. Peabody and we went the Way Forward machine and we came and talked to you guys. So,
by the way, don't you notice that the death mask has a striking resemblance? A striking resemblance.
No.
You know, if it doesn't look like, you know what I'm saying? If you're saying it doesn't look like this guy, it sure as heck looks like this guy.
So
You know
later
what I'm saying?
on,
This guy right there.
So later on in this conversation, we're going to talk about some of the anatomy that is found in the death mask and is found in the skeletal remains. That if you do not see that, it's not Joseph Smith.
Okay, interesting. Okay, keep going.
So then I'm going to show you this picture. So at this point, the bodies are prepared. They're in boxes. They've got ice in there. They put them in a wagon. They put boughs of leaves and branches over the top of them. They drive them back to Nauvoo, and they take them to the Nauvoo mansion. So this is a picture of the Nauvoo mansion. Now, what you see in the Nauvoo mansion is only a third of what it was. So if you look to the right of that, the door there on the right, there was a whole different wing there that had a big kitchen area and an area where people would eat, and then they also had a bunch of rooms that they rented out. So it was a hotel. Now that part burned down after Joseph was there, but all we have left is this. The church now owns this. I'd love to see them actually reconstruct and add the missing element. So the bodies came back into the Nauvoo house. The mansion house, and then they acquired caskets, but then they actually that's when Cannon made his copy of the death mass that night. So the reason why we know that they happened that night is they told us to do, and then we also knew that eventually the heat from the summer temperatures is going to affect the bodies, and they're going to start to swell. And so the casts were made soon enough to where there wasn't any swelling yet. The only evidence of death was what happened from the death itself, and then some rigor mortis. So you can account
because with Joseph Smith's face, you can see cheekbones.
Yes.
It's not puffed up or anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's the amazing thing. When I first saw
contours.
the death mask, I went, wow. They are very fresh. I mean, they did not have any decay or any swelling at all. So they have, and that's why I went looking to see, okay, why were they? And I discovered the ice and the ice houses and things like that. So then after that, they had prepared the bodies, they put them in the caskets, and then they put them back in these wooden boxes, and they laid them out in this eating area in what would be called the East Wing, ready for the saints to come see them.
Okay.
And so
kind of like some kind of processional, some kind of funeral.
It was a wake. Okay. It was a viewing for them. So they opened the doors first thing in the morning, and from morning to noon, the saints came in one door, probably this door that you see here, and then walked through and viewed the bodies. Now it's interesting. Yeah, the conversations that people recorded in their journals about the bodies. Those in the morning talk about how natural they looked and how sad they were, also noticing the wound in Hiram's nose. Yeah. And then by the later part of the evening, they started talking about they were looking puffy and distorted because the heat was now starting to affect them.
Okay.
Also, there was some comments to where some mentioned that there's some pooling of the body fluids underneath the casket and the boxes.
Okay.
Why that happened? Well, when the bodies were cooled that night, the night before, then the body fluids kind of coagulated.
They pool, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't pool. They stayed in.
They got cold, yeah, exactly.
So then when they warmed up, they slowly started to leak out.
Yeah.
So those things are very important for us to understand. If you're trying to reenact, Joseph's and Hiram's image, you need to know what's going on with these bodies and when.
Yeah. Well, and also, unfortunately, anybody that's had to deal with a human corpse of a loved one that has passed is aware of this phenomenon.
Yeah, like a cadaver that maybe is in the White House right now.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Shannon. Boy.
Did I say that?
Did I miss the joke
Yeah,
here?
I think some
A cadaver in the Oval Office right now?
No.
Now I get it. Like, what's that Weekend at Bernie's movie?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So
That's
this is the homestead. Joseph actually lived in this most of the time. He lived in Nauvoo. It wasn't only till 6 months or so before his death that he actually got to move into the mansion. So he didn't live in opulence most of his life there.
Interesting. Okay.
So
what the original premise of this podcast is what he actually looked like, what the forensic analysis is, whole thing. So you're giving us the history, but we're going to be rounding the corner to what he actually looked like.
Okay, we will round the corner. So this is the future site where the bodies were after that they were discovered. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of what happened. So back here, the reason why I had, where was it? This one here. This is across the street from the Nauvoo house. If you remember, there's two houses that were told by the Lord to build. One was the mansion house, and the other one was the Nauvoo house. The Nauvoo house was going to be...
Did the Lord really tell him to call it the mansion house, though?
No, it was just the house for Joseph.
Oh, okay. It just ended up getting called the mansion house?
Right.
Because that's one Giga Chad rapper god. If he's like, thou shalt make a mansion house
From white
with gilded doorknobs and toilets. You know what I'm saying?
The crib of the prophet.
And white... Yes.
Yeah. That's
so
funny.
the Nauvoo house was underneath construction. They had just finished the digging the basement out, and the frame, not the frame, but the foundation had gone up to the first floor. So, and it's important to know that. So at the next day after they closed up the mansion house, and they took the bodies. They took the caskets out of the boxes and put them upstairs in the mansion house. And then they put rocks or sandbags or something into the boxes, boarded them up, put them on wagons, and took them up to up above by the temple. And they did a funeral, and those boxes were buried in Joseph's tomb for that night.
Okay.
Then later on that night, past midnight, Emma had contracted with a number of men to come over, help her take the caskets down out of the mansion house, over across the street, down inside the basement area of the Nauvoo house, where they dug the two graves, and they buried the bodies there. Because
in the basement
of the Nauvoo house, which was open to the sky. There was nothing above it, so it was just, just got to that point, and they had stopped the construction. So the reason why they did that is there was a $500 bounty out on Joseph's head, and they were concerned that people were going to come forward, try to desiccate the grave, and cut Joseph's head off and take it back to Missouri. So that's why that happened.
Whoa.
Right. So the bodies stay there. So why don't you go ahead and take off my thing? You're not showing it, so let me go forward. So the bodies stay there. Here I have a picture of the Nauvoo house right now. So this is the top screen is the Nauvoo house, and you can see they never finished it up except for this one area. And you see the foundation in the northwest corner is the same foundation that was there when they buried them. And then so here it is a little bit closer, but from a front end. So this is where the bodies were buried for about 3 to 6 months. Then they started to go back and start doing work on the Nauvoo house again. And then Emma was concerned that the bodies were going to end up in the basement. She didn't want her husband and brother-in-law buried down there. So she contracted the same people to come dig them up. And then they moved them across the street to the grounds of the homestead. Now, here's a picture of the homestead a little bit before the turn of the century. If you look at the area that's on the left, that was all added onto afterwards. So that was not there. And you can see it a little bit better from this picture. And so there was an outbuilding that some people called a beehive. Some just called it an outbuilding. They took the coffins down to the basement there. They dug up the brick floor and then they dug below that and they put the 2 coffins in there. But before they did that, they had taken them up to the mansion house, and they opened them up so that Emma could view them. And she wanted to view them one more time and cut some hair.
Yeah, I was about to say, is this when she got the hair for the lockets that became the coffin canes?
Yes, it did.
I have held one of those.
Get out. Wait, what? When did you hold that?
Okay. One of the best parts of my job is the interesting people that come out of the woodwork, such as Shannon Tracy, who ends up being, one of the better experts on this, as well as different people that hold relics, shall we say, from church history. And correct me if I'm wrong. I can tell this part of the story, Shannon.
Okay.
Emma views the body. She's deeply moved, and she wants to express appreciation to those that were most loyal to her. Mm-hmm. So Dimmick Huntington asks for a lock of hair, and she grants him the ability to cut a lock of Joseph Smith's hair. So he cuts a locket of Joseph Smith's hair. But then she also shatters the glass of the window pane that was put on the original coffin that was made with planks from the mill next to Carthage prison when he was first killed. And like John Taylor's or whoever survived had to get the owner of the tavern to help him put the body on the buckboard that was going to take him back to Nauvoo. But he said, this isn't proper that men or bodies are just carried like this. So the guy owned a lumber mill, went back to the lumber mill, made some quick coffins overnight. And of those quick coffins, Emma Smith had strips of the oak that it was made out of cut. And I think she made 40 of them. Was it, Shannon? She made 40 strips?
It probably was not a coffin. It was just a wooden box.
Or a wooden box. That's what I should say. A temporary coffin / wooden box.
Right.
And Emma Smith took those pieces of the original coffin and handed them one by one to different people that were the most loyal to Joseph Smith. And Dimmick Huntington was one of them. And most of these people, many of them just carried around the stick and it got lost in family treasures, or who knows, accidentally burnt as firewood one day. But many of them had them made into canes, such as Brigham Young, Dimmick Huntington. I think a couple of the earliest prophets had them. And they were declared by George Q. Cannon as a relic of the Restoration that will heal thousands in the latter days.
Whoa!
And Dimmick Huntington had his locket of hair with the glass pane of the coffin embedded in the cane that was put on a lathe to become a cane. So there's actually pieces of Joseph Smith's hair embedded in wooden canes made of his coffin, and they're called the coffin canes. And the church owns a couple of them, but a couple of them are still held privately, including Dimmick Huntington's, and I've been able to see and hold it, and it is an experience, my man. It is an experience. Wow. Yeah, seriously.
So that is one of the many stories.
Yeah.
And there are also other myths out there that are there, but that is one of the stories that is going around. So yes, so I will I will not endorse or condemn that, but it is one of the stories. And if
I've held
one,
the coffin
if you've
cane.
seen one, well, there you go.
I mean,
I have not seen one of those. So
you haven't? We'll hook you up. Tom.
Okay, there you go.
So let me get this straight. Emma Smith gave one of those canes to Brigham Young.
I don't know that.
Because I'm looking
there's
this up
pictures.
right now on the
There's
internet.
pictures. If you literally Google right now the coffin canes, there's one in the Church History Museum.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at them right now, and it says one of them was given to Brigham Young.
Yeah, at one time, early after the martyrdom, they were still liking each other, and that kind of disintegrated quickly when Brigham was trying to get rid of all the property so they could move the saints west.
Yeah, so look at this right here. Here's one. The knob of this coffin cane bears the inscription presented by Brigham Young to Sidney Rigdon, 1844. It is one of 2 coffin canes on display at the Church History Museum. Yep. So this one was made into a cane like this. For some, here's a couple of pictures of the coffin cane as well. Some people just wrapped it in leather on a handle and had it above their there was 2 approaches. Wow. Like some people said, I don't want to spin this on a lathe. What am I? A Neanderthal? Like this is sacred. I'm going to keep it the way it is. And others said, oh, the best thing I could do with this piece of wood is to make it something beautiful and useful. And then they carved it into canes. But Dimmick Huntington's is very unique because it actually has that locket of hair in it with the glass that's the original viewing glass from the coffin.
Whoa, cool.
So so Emma actually had some here that she held on as well. And there's you can see that in a number of different locations. The Our Oldest Church had some, and I think we actually acquired some as well. So another thing.
Sorry, Shannon. One last question before I interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think if you hit a werewolf with one of those canes, it would kill him instantly?
Oh yes, of course. If they have silver knobs on them.
The audience was wondering. The chat was wondering. Okay, we got that.
Oh no,
we got
the
that
chat.
worked out.
Okay, so
That's funny. Okay, keep going.
So one other thing that happened is Emma had not told Hiram's wife that they were doing this. So she was left out of that. And very upset later on that she did not. But they opened up the coffin of Hiram, and they noted that his face had fallen in on itself. So all the bones that were from the eyebrows down to the top of the jaw had collapsed in.
Presumably from the injury of the impact to his face.
Yeah, and that's very important to know that, because later on when you're looking at skulls, you need to see a skull that has that evidence. So then they put the coffins back together. They took them across the street, found this building, they took the floor up from the bottom of the basement of that, which was just like cobblestones, and they set them aside, and then they dug down there and they put the coffins in there, put dirt over it, then put the cobblestones back on, and then they left it that way.
Okay, rock on.
So let me see if I've got another picture. Oh, there we go. This is a reconstruction of that building. And where it sits is the same location where it was found later on.
Okay.
Also looking from in, this is approximation. Whoa. Somebody looking down in there. I think that the door was a little bit bigger than that, because they were going to have to get the coffins down in that hole.
So this is an Odyssey, Shannon. Why the chase around so far? Why not just bury bodies like everyone else buries bodies? This is crazy.
Because Joseph's body had a bounty on it. So $500 in any condition whatsoever. If you brought the head back to Missouri, you'd get $500.
Good grief. Was there evidence that people were, have we found anybody who was chasing around looking for these things?
Yeah, the tomb was broken into a number of times afterwards.
Wow.
And then they eventually just took the wooden boxes out of them. And
man, that is the next level. Kind of gross if somebody's.
I don't know, but dude, couldn't you see like Nuanto doing that?
Yeah, there we go.
For $200,000, you don't think?
Yeah, sure. Okay, touche.
You're bringing Nuanto into this? Wow. Sorry.
No, modern day more like Alessa Grenfell,
right?
Like John DeLynn. You would.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like you would see. Hey, $3 million bounty for. I don't know, Kwaku L's head on a platter. You don't think freaking Bill Reel and RFM would take that?
There you go.
They wouldn't do some grave robbing, dog?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
So then, back to the story, because we got a lot to cover here. Time marched on. Emma dies. They bury her, and they have a marker for her. She actually had some lilac bushes. She loved lilac bushes, and she wanted to be buried in a specific location from the southwest corner of the mansion, of the homestead, and supposedly they buried her there. But then later on, Emma's not in the house anymore. They rent it out. The building gets knocked down, filled in with dirt, and then a pig pen is over the top of it. People don't know it at the time, but that's what happens. So the grave becomes unknown. In fact, Joseph's son, I think it's David, his youngest one that was not born yet, actually wrote a song called "The Grave of the Unknown Grave," and it's very haunting and very beautiful. I've heard it sung, but that's how much the story was around, that nobody knew where Joseph was buried. Somewhere there, the unknown grave. So even his son didn't know where it was.
Wow, and that early on, they lost track of it that early.
Well, probably in the 1870s time period, probably.
Jeez.
I don't know for sure when it's after Emma's death, and they started renting out the house.
Wow.
So then what's happening, though, is March forward to 1920s, the Keokuk Dam gets built. And they're doing that to try to make sure that there can be travel up and down the river, because right there at Nauvoo, There's the escutcheon, or whatever they call it. The limestone comes very close to the surface, and there's rapids there. We know about the rapids, and you can actually, certain places you could walk across the Mississippi just south of there because it was shallow. So they're damming it up to raise the water level. Well, as they raise the water level, it's encroaching on the property of Joseph and Hyrum. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
And so the RLDS Church have a meeting. They said, we need to send somebody out there to see if we can find the graves so that the graves do not wash away. And so there's the little picture here. The temple was not like that in 1928, but that was a picture drawn of what happened to the temple after it was hit by a tornado.
Okay.
So in 1928, they go to a member of the RLDS Church. His name is W.O. Hands. He's an engineer, and he is tasked with $500 and to go up to the Smith Cemetery and see if he can find the graves. And so what they do is, and here's an overview of what the Smith grave cemetery looks like. So you
wow,
see,
look at that.
yeah,
Okay.
so this is Emma's grave marker down at the center bottom, and then this is, you see off lower below that is a lilac bush.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
over in the right hand side, you see 3 grave markers. Some
Yeah.
of those may be senior Joseph, a brother or two. So all of this whole area is all the different Smith families as they were buried there.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Pretty cool. And then down towards the water, you see there's a building right there on the water level.
Yeah.
And then there's one that you don't see here by where those boards are on the lower right hand side. So this is important just to know. This is what the Smith cemetery looked like. So they go there, and he hires some local people to start digging around. And so they go down towards the water, and they know from pictures that there's an old building there, but it's not there anymore. So they dig it up, and they found a foundation, and they dig below that. They go deep enough to where all of a sudden they start hitting water, and they find undisturbed dirt. So they know this is not it. So they abandon that. Then
How do you know it's undisturbed dirt?
Well, there's a difference. You can tell the difference between dirt that's been moved or dug up and then put back in.
Yeah, how? Especially when you got the waters of the Mississippi River lapping into it. How?
I don't know, but there's a way that they,
You know, it's like it's freaking dirt, dude.
They had an engineer there called W.O. Hand. He knew.
Yeah, these idiots that said 6 feet to stop the spread for 2 weeks. Oh yeah, undisturbed dirt. This is undisturbed dirt. You know,
They like taste it. They like taste it. Like
yeah,
that's undisturbed dirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's Emma's gravesite. This was placed in there obviously long after they buried her. Now, W.O. Hand starts being frustrated because he can't see anything. So they start trenching across where Emma was because they know that she gave a specific location where she wanted to be buried. And so they think, well, maybe she wanted to be buried where she knew her husband was. And then they dig trenches, and they finally go across the front of where those lilac bushes are, and they find leg bones. And they go, maybe we found them. Well, they dig it up, and they find out it's Emma because it's a woman, and they also find remains of her coffin, very little, but then also she had a lace neck piece that she wore in a I think a brooch or something, and they found that there. So they knew they had found Emma. So they put her bones, they take them up into the mansion house.
Well, how do they know they didn't just cross-dress the body so they wouldn't get pilfered?
Well, they didn't find any rubber nose. I don't know what.
Because she had Thrive, a tattoo that said Thrive.
Right. We'll put, of course, right.
All right, keep
So
going.
now one thing that they did notice is that her bones were quite deteriorated. And so she lived a lot older, and she probably suffered from osteoporosis. So that was the weakening of the bones. And so
interesting.
Her skull and other bones were less intact than what we'll talk about later on. So then, as you see on the left side of that picture, you see that there's some open dirt there. Well, they found another foundation.
Okay.
And as you see that there, they start digging around, and they call this the bee house. And so this is the old bee house. Their hopes run really, really high. Now, what had happened before that? They had been frustrated. They're about ready to give up. W.O. Hands, I think it was on Sunday, he tells all the saints there, which are our LDS church, to fast and pray that they would have success. And literally the next day they found this. So he
Oh, wow, okay.
he attests that to prayer and fasting.
Good.
Wow,
Rock on.
cool.
Yep.
Huh, believe it or not, it works. Whoa.
So underneath a flat rock, which actually was one of the cobblestones, they on the northwest corner, they found a skull. They find this skull right here. You see it there with the arrow,
Yeah.
and there's a flat rock, and then this is the Wall Street Journal. Obviously, Joseph was reading that when they buried it. I don't know.
That's funny.
So then there's the other skull that they see here with the other red arrow in the middle of the picture. And then you notice that skull is less intact. There's not any facial bones there. And so when they see the first skull, they see that there is a break in part of the skull. And they go, well, Hiram was shot in the face. That must be him. And then when they see the next skull, they said, well, we know Joseph fell out of the window, and this is all, maybe he fell on his face.
Oh boy.
And so they made that.
So they made snap judgments.
Yes. So here's what we call the more intact skull. You see this break here?
Yeah.
There's a problem with that. We'll come back to that. And this is a side view of that. So they weren't thinking about anatomically put them together, but they did put them, there's some type of probably a brick or something that resting on the back of the head.
Okay.
So then that's what we call the more intact skull. And this is the less intact skull, which they identified as Joseph.
Which kind of makes sense because, wait, no, you'd think that was Hiram because he was shot in the.
Yes.
Okay.
So then here's the back of the skulls.
Okay.
And then there's a watch and then a wooden ruler. They didn't take measurements. I'm not sure what they did. I'm hoping it wasn't the wooden ruler because it wouldn't be very, very good. But you can see there's a distinction between the different types of skulls. One's kind of more rounded, the one there on the left, and one's a little bit more elongated. And the less intact skull was the elongated one. And if you can see, the water level came up and down and left watermarks on the skulls.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, just let's keep going, pound through
Okay,
this,
pound.
and let's get to what he looked like, baby.
So then they dug a brand new place to bury them, just to the north of that. And if you notice, there's a tent over there that the bodies were left in that grave, except for the skulls, where they went up and took pictures of them.
Okay.
So oops, I'm going backwards. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good.
Then they put 2x12s together, pound them into a box, and they put they say it was silk, white silk, and on the far right they put Emma's remains there, and you can tell it's not quite as complete. And then in the middle one they put the less intact skull one there, and then in the far right they put the more intact skull.
So they put who they think is Joseph in the middle.
Right, correct.
Ah.
Now, one thing I wish I would have seen closer pictures of these, because what would be an identification of Joseph that we could tell by, say maybe a leg bone?
Oh, you're right. The leg surgery.
Yeah.
Right. So when he had his leg surgery when he was very, very young, they actually extracted part of that leg. And then what had happened is what you don't see that happens later on inside the body is the body mends the bone, and that will be a wider piece of leg bone there. Now, I broke my right leg. I got hit by a truck when I was on a motorcycle, and it broke my lower leg bone in half. So when they put it back, it hurt very bad. I saw my bike going around in circles, and I go, "Oh, that doesn't look good."
Okay.
And then the guy ran up and said, "Have an accident?" And I said, "No, thank you. I just had one."
Oh, jeez.
Little humor there. So that my bone there, if you feel in that same area, is fatter. It kind of gets longer because the body tries to tries to mend that, and that would have happened here. But I couldn't use it. I was looking for that. That would have been great. So then they pound 2x12s on top of those. They had put sand and concrete as a pad down below there. They put concrete all the way around there, and then cover them up with dirt and sand, and take a picture because W. Hans was very patriotic. And then they take Emma's grave marker, which you see here, and they cut it in 3 pieces, turn it over, and they made new grave markers because they were very frugal. Remember, he only had $500. So Emma's old grave marker becomes the new grave markers for Joseph, Emma, and Hiram.
Wow.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and so that's what they look like.
They think. Right.
Yes, well, we're getting there. So along comes Shannon Tracy, and he's doing a little project, and the RLDS church finds out what he's doing, and they go, and I found out that they actually had photographs of the skeleton remains. So I asked him, could I get access to those? I'm good. This is actually the Philo-Dibble mold. And you see there's the mold from the back, here's the top, and you see this little thing here. If you pull that out, there's a plaster impression inside there.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
This is what the Philo-Dibble mold looks like. Somebody says, well, every time they poured the molds and to get a plaster casting, they had to break them. Well, no, they didn't. They just put a releasing agency in there, and so they would put it inside there, and then they would pull it out with that little knob, and that's how they would get an impression.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
So
you looked at their stuff and figured out that they got the bodies wrong.
Yeah. So later on, as I'm trying to put together and it used the skulls, I knew that we had to positively identify the skulls, or I couldn't use them because there wasn't any string that went from when Joseph was killed and then buried there and then dug them up. There was this provenance that was missing. So we first cleaned up the skulls and looked at them in detail, and I had some doctors come over and help me. One of them was a maxillofacial surgeon. He's used to putting faces back together when they've had damage. So he came and looked at the skulls, and then we had an anatomist from BYU. They together looked at these images and said what I suspected. They said, well, there's a problem here. This skull has had a lot of damage to it, and this is not what would happen to Joseph, but it would be what would happen to Hiram. So we knew there was a problem there. One thing that we do know is here's a picture that most people have never seen, is a lower picture of the skull of what we now know is Joseph. And there is no damage to this whole area where a bullet would have had to transfix itself if it was Hiram.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
So
they guessed wrong.
They guessed wrong.
Oh,
so
boy.
Here I am, and then we move the skulls, we break them into different pictures so that we can actually create better images of them, and we move the jaws up into a better position to where they are more natural, and then we start taking those images and digitize them into the computer. We've already digitized the death mask. And then what we can do then is say, okay, which death mask fits on the skull? Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that was much more convincing, is that the more intact skull had the profile that would fit Joseph. And the less intact skull, which we had, but yet was harder because it was less intact and was not taken as wrong picture. So I burned through these things real quick. I should have taken these out. Sorry about that.
So you took the death masks. So you, grave robber,
that was me,
took personally made death masks approved by the brethren.
Yes.
Put them on top of the actual skulls and determined that everybody had been wrong this whole time.
Photographs of the skulls, not the skulls.
Oh my gosh, look at this. So you superimposed
cool.
the pictures of the 3D renderings over the skulls. Wow.
Right. So there are people who do not like this and complain about that. Now, I will tell you, this is 1996. Technology has come a long ways. I would throw all this out and do it again with modern day technology. I have all the information.
No, that's fair enough.
So
I mean, you work
even
with what
I'm
you
not
have.
happy with it. But this is breaking news stuff back then.
I mean, that's actually quite mature of you to say that you would do it again. I mean, if you were, other academics would say, "Oh, it's perfect and it always will be," and I'll never go back on
you want to know why? You want to know why is because he can't overcome the sensation that it kind of looks like this guy in this locket.
Does.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's why. That's exactly
take another
why.
picture of me. See if
Shannon,
there's any.
just give a little nod. Just give a tiny little nod.
Huh?
Okay,
That's funny, dude.
So then you see this break over here. Well, Hiram was shot up here on the nose, on the left side, up here.
Yeah.
And that's whole. And so not down here. So they made a mistake, but the whole top of the jawbone's missing. Well, we suspect that as they were digging them up, those pieces probably got lost in the grave and didn't get photographed. They just got overlooked because it was, they
had $500.
Yeah.
They didn't have an excavation team that's getting bone shards and shards of the pottery out of every single sifted ounce of sand. They're worried that the waters from Nauvoo are coming up, and it's not like the Brighamite billionaires owned the site at that point.
No.
It was
Yeah.
all our RLDS volunteers.
So now we're
Okay.
going to talk about some details here. What did he look like? So on Joseph's skull, if you notice these two red marks, the top one and the second one down, the left side of his face, the top of the bridge is lower and flatter than the right side. And
Okay.
the cheekbone is flatter and lower as well.
Okay.
So we suspect that this could have been through some damage that he had during his life. Oh, maybe when he was being mobbed and dragged out of his house, and then with the vial of poison tried to force down, and that it just healed out. Or some of this could be genetic. But it is a marker for Joseph. If you do not see this area that is different, then it's not him. So let's take a look at the death mask. Well, lo and behold, guess what? It's there. It's the same thing. Lower
Wow.
and flatter.
You're right.
So we know that this is a marker for the anatomy of Joseph. If you don't see this in skulls or in photographs, then it's not him.
Okay, interesting. And what's mine? Is it like,
I don't know.
I mean, is mine like lower and
I'd
flatter?
have
Like
to,
what?
first
Really
I'd have
tall.
to kill you and
Okay.
make a death mask.
In the name of science, I can commend my body to thy
There you go.
dutiful hands.
Selfless sacrifice, Cardin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So this is us putting the combined information inside a 3D model of Joseph.
okay.
So then what we did is modern day
Oh,
technology.
dude, bro, look at that computer.
Yeah.
Look at that computer, dude.
Wow.
Yeah, did Steve Jobs let you borrow his MC Hammer pants and his Apple IIc Plus when you did
Dude,
this, bro?
Just so
You got like 3.5 bits in that computer.
yeah,
so
holy
if you look
smoke.
closely at the
In
death,
between, hold on. In between the death masks, did you just like play Oregon Trail just to keep it in the pioneer vibe, bro?
So-
Can you play Run DMC on that?
I meant to bring these death masks with me because if you look closely on them, there are lines that are drawn on them, and the eyes, everything. So what happened is you see that little black contraption there that has a
Wait,
stylus?
you have the death masks still and you didn't bring them?
You didn't bring them?
Sorry, I meant to also bring the sword of Laban, and I forgot that too.
Shit.
Get thee hence from my studio.
I'll bring it by next time.
Spawn of Satan giving me FOMO. You know, FOMO Satan. Okay, cool.
So, or you can come visit me. You know, I drove out here. So, just saying, you know.
Hashtags. Do I get a t-shirt when I show up to your
Sure,
place?
I actually have t-shirt. I have an old Bush Quail t-shirt. You can have it.
Okay, cool. Keep going.
A relic.
Really. So you see that little armature that's black there? It's actually hooked to a black stylus that he's holding, and he's going across each of the intersections of the lines, and he's making a click with his other left hand and making a marker there. And what that is doing is in 3D time inside the computer, it's placing a dot, and then they're putting the lines together and creating a line, a grid mark. So we're doing like they do with maps. It was grid lines on
Now they just scan it with a cool laser and
Exactly.
it's done in 5 seconds.
and
yeah.
instead of these wide bursts, they're like they have where we have 10, they have 1,000.
This is how
Yeah.
they stole the Mask of Nefertiti. Do you remember the Mask of Nefertiti?
And they took one of her eyeballs out too.
The no, when I
what?
say they
What?
stole it, no, you got to look at this. The Mask of Nefertiti was a very controversial relic because it was taken legally in, I believe, the teens or the 20s during a regular excavation between, I think it was like the University of Berlin and the British Museum in conjunction with the Department of Antiquities in Egypt. And the rule back then was, we keep half the relics and pay for the dig. You keep half the relics and don't have to pay for anything. You just give us permission. That's the way old school Egyptian archaeology was for like 100 years. And everybody was happy because they all got relics. Now, Egypt reserved the right if there was a unique artifact, like if they found only one statue of Pharaoh or one tomb of Pharaoh, Egypt got to keep it. But if there was two, Egypt got to pick which one first, and then the British Museum got the secondary one. Well, when the Mask of Nefertiti came up, the intern took a picture of it, cataloged it as a statue of a female dignitary or whatever, put it in the stack of 15 other statues of dignitaries. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The the Egyptian government kind of said, okay, of all these statues, okay, we get half, you get half. And then it wasn't until years and years and years later when people figured out like, oh, this is Nefertiti. This isn't just a regular dignitary. Oh, this is the epitome of beauty. This shows that the ancient Egyptians had, similar beauty standards to us and actually were just gorgeous. And then Nefertiti became this big thing. And all of a sudden Egypt's like, well, no, we want it back. And the British Museum is saying, no, this was part of the deal. And they're saying, you didn't say there was 2 busts of Nefertiti. And they said, well, we didn't know who Nefertiti was. So now it's a modern argument about who really should have the bust of Nefertiti. Now, legally, it's in the hands of the British and it ain't going anywhere. If it is the British, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's the British. But because of that argument, a couple of activists, I guess you could call them, figured out how to rig in a satchel a laser scanning device. And over a couple of days, they went and they faked they were tourists that were looking at the bust of Nefertiti because you weren't allowed to even take pictures in there. So I think they lied somehow saying why they needed their bag or whatever. And they little spies cut holes in it and they developed batteries big enough to power the device that's the laser scanner. And they scanned the bust of Nefertiti by walking around it in the museum enough. And now on the dark web, you can buy the 3D scan and 3D print an exact copy to the micron of the bust of Nefertiti. It's really interesting. Yeah, if you got a 3D printer, you could print it out. It used to be you could buy them on eBay, but then eBay said no, this is Relics theft for some reason, and you're no longer allowed to buy them. But on the dark web, there's literally the CNC file of the bust of Nefertiti that's open source from some freaking activists. Yeah, I'll have to look it up while we're talking.
Dude,
so
that is so Mission Impossible.
Would you like to buy my copy?
Would you like to buy your copy? Yeah, exactly, dude.
So to get us back into this other thing, so should we have a conversation about
hit it.
Debunking who killed Nefertiti?
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
Sorry.
So keep going, bro. Keep going.
Okay, so if you show the picture on the screen there, there's a group called Zygote Media, and they were just new and starting up, and they were hungry, and I was poor, and I hired them to help me with this, and we actually they were known already for being able to do 3D models of anatomy of people. And obviously they got better, but they were known for that. And so they took on the challenge of doing Joseph and Hiram. And they weren't dirt cheap, but they were cheaper than anybody else. And they lived in Linden. Or someone, no, not Linda, but they lived in Spanish Fork or something like that.
By the way, just to wrap it up really fast, I'm sorry, I did look this up. Jonah, I just want to show my social proof. I was incorrect. They were 2 German activists, and it was in the Central German Museum. So 2 German artists walked into the Nauvoo Museum in central Berlin in October and used a mobile device to secretly scan the 19-inch tall bust of Queen Nefertiti in a limestone and stucco sculpture more than 3,000 years old. That's one of Germany's most visited attractions, and these 2 were the ones that did it. Yeah, exactly. So this is
nuts.
Hans and Franz said.
Yeah, this is exactly what Homeboy's doing here, but with his own little scanner going over the face inch by inch, piece by piece. Okay, keep going.
So you're basically Tom Cruise is what you're telling us. You're Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible,
Can you tell
Shannon.
that from
That's
my
what it is.
side profile? Yeah.
And Vicky is Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider. Rock on. Go, Vicky.
Yeah.
You go, girlfriend.
Yeah.
No, okay.
So on this picture, if you'll show the one that I have up, you can see that there's a red line in front of that skull. Well, that's the 3D scanned line drawing mask over that being overlaid, and then you can see the different death masks are there. So we were able to take those, put them there, have a trace outline of the skulls, and try to take and extrapolate from the death masks going back to where the skulls were to create 3D models. And see, the green is the created from the skulls, the red is the digitization of the death masks, and eventually we created these models. Now, they didn't have hair type routines then, so this is actually somebody sculpted some hair and we put that on there. But if you looked inside the jaw, there's teeth in there. We did have teeth.
Wow.
And so then these are the things of we remember we talked about the wounds of Joseph and Hiram. So
Yeah, cool.
Here's Joseph and here's Hiram. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the next stage. So the RLDS Church had come to me, and I said, I have to do my first project first. I cannot stop and take a look at your Daguerreotype. So I said, afterwards, I'll come take a look at it, but I have to do the first. So the first book, I did a project. It ended up in a book. It was called In Search of Joseph, and it made the press. It was very popular in Utah and Arizona and other places, sold out. And then I went back and started looking at this Daguerreotype. So what you're seeing there right now is what it looked like originally. There's a lot of fingerprints and scuffs and scratches. Then we cleaned it up to make a different version of it. And you notice there is a stamp here in the top. That is a stamp of a maker's mark that tells you when it and who made it. This stamp says it was made after Joseph was dead, which was a problem.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's a problem.
But there's a solution to that. Daguerreotypes are only the mirror image of whatever you're taking a picture of. There was only one. It's on a copper impregnated, or a silver impregnated copper plate, and then you took your picture. Took a couple minutes to do it, and then you developed it with mercury nitrates, and usually your hair falled out and you died early. But
wow, okay.
Daguerrean photographers, they didn't live long, and they usually went crazy and wandered around chasing the animal farm people. So
wow.
So it was not a very good thing to do.
Jeez, okay.
You can look that up, Jonah. That's part of your apocrypha. So then I had an artist working with me. They put eyes in there. There's a couple things to look here. If you look, there's a vest on there, and you look there's a pattern there. So we know it's kind of like a crust of velvet pattern, and that there is a watch fob with a key on the end there. And then you also see that there's wrinkles in the shirt. And those wrinkles coincide with somebody who has a pot belly, and the shirt comes down and then comes out a little bit. So you have somebody who has a barrel chest. I think that was a description of when they said Joseph in his later age. And
I'll just point out, as the resident forensic expert, that if you look at the left side of his face, the cheekbone and the eyebrow are just slightly lower.
So where were you in 1996 when I was doing this work?
Look at that. Shannon, I'm an expert.
There
Boom,
you are.
right here.
So that pocket watch is also something that Joseph had. The neck that comes out of the bottom, that's a key. And you would open up the back of the pocket watch and you twist it in there and wind it. So also down in the left hand, you see some reflection on the next to the last of the ring finger. It looks like there is actually a ring there. So, and then also, people have examined this clothing. The clothing is what you would see from that time period. And also that cravat is probably either a deep maroon or a very dark blue.
What's a cravat?
It's a big hole in the ground. No.
Okay.
The super bow tie, right?
It's a bow tie, yes.
Oh, okay.
Dude, we should merch that up for WardRadio. Look at that thing, huh?
Yeah, so this image,
right?
Interesting, later on when I published my second book, which is about the photograph, the RLDS Church sued me for copyright.
Wait, the RLDS Church sued you?
Yeah, I had really good friends there I waited almost 10 years to publish the second book about the photograph, but they kept getting cold feet, and then they changed their name. They weren't believing the Book of Mormon was...
Was this before or after they said the Book of Mormon was no longer scripture?
After.
Okay.
So some good friends there, and I still love them. They're great people. Their leadership was just being nervous about us coming out and saying anything about this as being a possible daguerreotype because
sounds like our leadership.
Yeah. Well,
they got nervous bureaucrats too. Rock on.
So the problem is that this image came to them in the 1960s, I do believe, from somebody who said that they were relatives of the Smith family. They gave them this daguerreotype of a family Bible and a bunch of other Smith stuff. But there is no provenance to link it to somebody who said, click smile Joseph. It's not there. So we had to use technology to analyze it to see if it was. And they do that all the time. Well, we were kind of breaking new ground and people weren't believing it. So in the whole thing at that time period, we were inventing new processes that are just commonplace now.
Okay.
So here's a larger infusion of that. Then here's some of the examination helping people see that, hey, here's the oil painting of Joseph, which is not very good of him, but I think it was painted after he died using the daguerreotype. The daguerreotype in the middle, the death mask lighting things up to see where they line up.
So what did he look like? Which one is it, bro? Come on, baby.
Have patience, young man.
Okay. Oh, jeez, man. Okay.
So there's the skull over the photograph, over the skull, the death mask.
Wait, go back to that one. That's some NCIS stuff right there.
Yes, it is. So here you go, superimposing them. Now, there is someone out there who thinks that I modified the image of the skeletons. We used Photoshop, and we put in the lock feature where you can scale, but you can't change the aspect ratio. And now I will tell you, technology has come a long ways. And once I've told you, I would redo the whole project. I'd throw all this out and start over with the original information, which we still have.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason why you do that is if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're wrong. And so in modern technology, you should
unless you are the smartest person in the room.
Unless like me, like you are.
That's why you're here, Joni. You're the apocrypha guy. So then also any forensic person will always have questions and question everything until you can actually find as close as you can to the truth and the proofs of that. So never ever say 100% you've got it. With this image, we did say that we felt that we were about 95 to 98%
Dude,
sure.
Look at the eyes. Look at the eye sockets. They match perfectly.
They do.
Look at the left side, the right side.
Yep, they do.
Look at it, just fits perfectly right on.
Yep, they do. So
that's crazy.
So you think that picture is a picture of Joseph Smith then?
So at the time when we came out with the rebook, we said, and we used also some analyzation that the FBI used, and came to our conclusion that this is 98% matches up to the anatomy of Joseph. And so,
whoa,
yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty fun.
Okay, so hold on, but let's figure out what the claim is here.
Okay.
So I want to know what you think. Go back to that picture right there. Okay, not the skull. There we are.
This one.
Do you think that is indeed the picture of Joseph Smith?
I do, and the timing is very important. This is a very young Joseph Smith, but remember, when people described what Joseph looked like, they always said he looked very young. So the question is, when did this picture be taken? Well, Joseph went back to Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to argue for the redress of the saints in Missouri back in 1890. And back at that time, there was what? No, 1890.
Okay.
No, 1839. I'm sorry. I need another hit of the thing here.
So he's 30. Another slam of the V8 energy drink. This episode is brought to you by V8 energy drinks.
Yeah. So there was a Daguerrean imager back in there. In fact, there was only like 4 or 5 blocks from where they stayed. And so the possibility is Joseph loved technology. He really did. In fact, there was what is the person? They measured the bumps of your hair, a phrenologist there, not too far. And he had his head measured by the phrenologist. Now, when he got through with that, he turned to the brother and says, I don't believe in this stuff. It's just voodoo science. I mean, he didn't call it that, but he told him he didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
But he had it measured anyways because it was fun. So then we think that this was taken when he was still young. So we're talking 1839.
He'd have been 33 years old.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So very young.
Right.
And it would be, and the reason why it would have been some of the newer technology, and the Daguerrean image just hit the United States that year, but then it exploded. Within a few years, it was everywhere, and they had improved on the process to where it wasn't taking 3 or 4 minutes, but it could just take 30 seconds and things like that. So this is an early version of a Daguerreotype, and his eyes were blurry. The ones we have in here are not his eyes; those were created ones that were really pretty, and they're like they're gray or blue or something that should be.
Okay, cool. All
wow,
right,
that's
all right.
crazy.
So now, where was this found, and why is this not more in the zeitgeist that this is the daguerreotype of Joseph Smith? What is the steelman of the opposing arguments against it?
Why are you wrong?
Why am I wrong? And what is the
Because I got to tell you, this picture right here that you're claiming looks like Joseph Smith, go back to it. That picture there that you're claiming looks like Joseph Smith.
Right.
Oh, wait, no, you got to get back to it. Yeah.
I'm getting back to it. It's just scrolling to the right way.
Okay, so that picture right here, that picture right there, bro,
right,
looks nothing like this guy right here.
Nope.
Okay, and definitely nothing like that guy right there. Although I don't know, maybe it could.
But that guy would be just before his death, probably, if it's Joseph. So we're talking
Isn't
5 years.
Isn't his hair a little dark? I thought Joseph was supposed to have lighter
Here,
hair.
let's talk about colors and things like that and shades. A couple things. If you look at this picture, if you look at the one side of Joseph's hair, he's missing a lot up there on the top of his head.
Yes.
Remember, when he was mobbed, when they put tar on him, they pulled out his hair from the roots, and it never grew back then. And then also,
what?
Yeah. So he was always missing part of that. And then also, when they tried to shove the vial of poison down his mouth, they broke his teeth.
Yes.
And there's a slight indentation, or should be, where a scar is on part of his lips, which we see here. So
what?
Okay.
So,
oh my gosh.
Once again, when you take, if you look at just, the anatomy, and the best way to do that is you take the death mask and you turn it upside down and you look at it. You take a photograph and you turn it upside down and you look at it, because now you're not looking at a face, because the body will do whatever it wants to when it sees a face. The eyes will do that. So the best thing is to try to make it not look like a face, but look at the details. So yeah, you brought somebody else's picture up there. So this image is out there. It's all out over the internet. But the reason why they don't like it is when we first came out, we were using real new technology. And
who's the they? When you say the reason they don't like it, who's the they? Is it the godless academics that said 2 weeks to slow the spread and 6 feet of social distancing, like a bunch of knuckle dragging troglodytes that preserve a narrative in a political system instead of truth itself? Or were these actual respectable people of an academic consensus that use the scientific method to create repetitively, naturalistically observed phenomena? Who is this?
So they, and I probably won't use all your adjective, but I like some of those.
Okay.
But yes, it was a lot of the academics, and it was also a lot of the scientific people that had not caught up with the world. So NCIS was not around yet.
Okay.
So we were actually, when we were doing these things, there was a few people in Hollywood that had contacted me to get some of my images. In fact, there's a magazine called Image Magazine, and they asked if I would make a 3D model of Joseph, at least of the head, and give it to him. Now, I didn't have the money to colorize it, so we just did a black and white one, and it was done with the wrong lens in the camera, but it was there. So I sent it to them, and they said, well, we're going to put it in one of our magazines. And I said, what's it about? And they said, well, you'll see. So the magazine came out, and on the cover it has Joseph Smith, Spock, and Captain Kirk.
Wait, what?
Okay.
3D models saying the future will come that we will no longer need to have actors. We will do it all in 3D models, and we don't have to pay them so much.
Okay. Jeez.
So that was, and remember, this is the beginning of 3D animation. We were inventing processes. We had to do that just to get what we wanted to do. And so it had not become common knowledge, and it had not been accepted. And so we were way out on the edge of this. So there were people also who had their own favorite Joseph Smith that this didn't look anything like it. And then also it didn't look like their favorite painting or drawing. And I can show you 15, 20 different paintings and drawings, and they are all over the place. My favorite is the one that looks like Dracula.
Okay, cool.
And then there's one that has Joseph Smith leaning over the rail in can't remember what court he's in. It's just, they are everywhere. And then you have
so look, we only got 7 minutes left here.
Okay, well,
and we've already into triple overtime.
You're right.
What's the steel man against the argument that this is indeed the daguerreotype of Joseph Smith, of young 33-year-old Joseph Smith?
So it is. There is no proof of who the daguerrean is. It's not there. So there is no. Well, you said there was a maker's mark. Well, okay, yeah. So then back on the maker's mark, which is important. What we find out is that probably what we're seeing here is a copy of a daguerreotype, which takes the mirror image and turns it into a positive. And let me see. I need to find. Why don't you go off the screen and I'll try to find the.
Okay.
No.
I'm just on you right now, bro.
So I'm trying to find that daguerrean image. So what we find out is that when I looked at the daguerreotype, what we find here, now you can show that up.
Yeah.
You find that when you look closely at that, and I've held it in my hands and I've looked at it, if you turn it to one area, it turns into a mirror and it just reflects. But what you see when you do that, you see fingerprints and scratches and then you go back, and then you see them on here. But then you also do it again, and you see those fingerprints and scratches. But then you go back, you see, well, there's more fingerprints and scratches. Those are photographically on there. So there's photograph copies of fingerprints and scratches, and there's actual physical figure.
So it's a copy.
It's a copy. And that was how they made copies of daguerreotypes back then.
So the date is the date of a copy.
Yes.
So it's kind of like it's like the manuscripts and HMD of old manuscripts. The earliest known copy of a manuscript we have is, I believe, a piece of the Book of Mark. It's like P52.
P52.
Is it a piece of Book of John or Book of Mark?
I think it's P52 or P51, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Tiny little postage.
Yeah,
dude, this is so cool. So the date that they discredit it by is a date of a copy.
Right. Well, they say, well, you don't have to proof it's a
gosh.
copy. And I said, no, you look at the daguerreotype itself.
So where's the original of this daguerreotype, and how can we go see it?
Who knows where it is? But just looking at the daguerreotype.
Oh, shut up.
itself-
You're so full of crap.
Shannon's
you
got it.
are
He's got
so full of crap, Shannon.
He's got
Give
it
me my
in his
shirt
glove
back. No,
box.
I'm just kidding. I just kidding. That's funny.
So really, it's the daguerreotype itself is the proof that it's a copy, because on the image, you see that there are scratches and fingerprints on the surface, and there are photographic scratches and fingerprints on the print. So it's a copy. It
Now,
proves itself.
how would they have done this? So they could take a photo of a daguerreotype back then?
Well, so what they would do is they put the daguerreotype on an easel. They would light it up very well. Then they would put a new plate inside the daguerreotype, get close and crop it as best you can, and then take a picture of it. And then they would develop. They would develop the copy, and that was very common. That's how they made copies.
Dude, I'm sold. We found Joseph Smith's photograph right here. We did it. Cardin Ellis and Jonah Barnes found the daguerreotype of Joseph Smith.
Yeah, forget Shannon Tracy. Sorry,
He's
pal.
holding out on us.
Yeah,
He's holding out on us.
So we go back to the misidentification of Hiram and Joseph. So this is Hiram. It's obviously a face that got shot through its face, and it blew away everything. And then even the witness of Hiram, after he had been dead for a while, buried in the ground, dug back up, put up again in the Nauvoo, the mansion house, when they looked at his face, it had fallen in. The other skull does not look like it would have fallen in. This one, this one looks like it would have fallen in. So I don't have to say that. You need to look for that in the skulls. Plus, what matches up. So now there is an artist that, before I came along, and I didn't know about that, he said he did a forensic study to do some statues of that. And what he did is somebody had gone into the RLDS's archives and had taken some clear material and took the photographs out, and then they traced over them, and then they stole them out of the archives. And so those trace outlines is what he got to use. Now, if you do just the trace outlines, you don't get the finer details of what's going on with the skulls. You don't see that what they saw that they thought was maybe a break in the actual jawbone is actually a jawbone behind another piece of skull. And so and you don't see that. But when you actually see them as real photographs, then you know the difference. So he did not have the reverse identification. So when you go look at, I'm not going to mention him, you look at his statues, and there's a difference in size of skulls on bodies that just don't seem natural. So he thought that I was trying to disprove his, and his artwork is beautiful. I can't do what he does, and I always praise what he did there, but I do not consider it a forensic reconstruction because of the elements that he used were not of the most direct source. So
did you find a daguerreotype photograph of Hiram?
No.
Oh, bummer.
But if you got $50,000, I could sell you one.
Hey.
Yeah, right there, baby. By the way, who do you think this could be? The $95,000 daguerreotype that's on, not this one, sorry. This guy right here that's going for $95,000 on eBay.
Yeah, I think that's Popeye's great-great-grandfather.
Oh, yeah. Popeye. Yeah.
He's got that little
Popeye.
puff of hair on top. It's definitely not Joseph. And there was no photograph until later on of Emma. She was much older. Well, she wasn't that much older. She was. She had her baby in her lap little David, and she looks like the weight of the world was upon her. She looks really hard. So if you look at that, you can't really feel. You come down on Emma. I mean, she lost her husband. She lost everything. So it was hard time for her.
Yeah.
But yet she was partially responsible for Joseph feeling like he had to go back, because it was her letter and Mark's letter that came over there and told Joseph that he was being
partially is a very kind word.
Okay, well, that's as far as I will go. I am not in a position to judge man nor woman. That is not my role. I have enough
so noble
sins.
of you. Huh? So noble of you.
Well,
all right, now that we're done all being noble, can we get back to the story?
Okay.
No,
so let me. So where else do we want to go with this?
No, that's it. So I guess, because I mean, we're
it.
already a minute over here.
Right.
I just want to make sure that I got this straight. Okay. I want to make sure that I got this straight so I know where to rest this part in my brain.
Right.
You are swearing your sacred honor.
No, but you're saying, to the best of your understanding, that this is the daguerreotype of, you think that's a likeness of Joseph Smith, that this daguerreotype is of Joseph Smith. You're confident saying that?
Yeah, so based upon the technology that we had available to us at that time, that I felt comfortable enough to say that this was within 95 to 98% Joseph.
Come on, somebody sticks a gun to your head and says yes or no. Do you say yes or no to this being the picture of Joseph Smith?
I pull out my 45 and I say, pull the trigger and see who happens first.
I heard yes. I heard yes.
Okay, so here,
now, but then you never said, what's the steel man against this really fast?
It is that there is no provenance. That you can't take a picture back from this picture to the person that says, smile, Joseph, click. That's not
so
there.
We don't know who took this daguerreotype.
We do not. We have.
But provenance. Look, a lot of provenance.
But we know it exists, though. Whether or not we know who took the photo, we know the photo exists before Photoshop.
Yeah. So what we did is we took science and all the evidence we had, and we jumped over provenance, which they do all the time now. So we were some of the first people that says, well, you don't need the provenance. You can take science and jump over the top of it. And
yes, because provenance is just a couple steps above hearsay a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I love it. You used science. You went full on NCIS to reconstruct.
Because, by the way, Mark Hoffman relied on provenance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mark Hoffman's provenance and his fake provenance made it so that forensically unverifiable evidences passed as real because the provenance was good. Right. And provenance, look, first off, I'm a huge respecter of provenance. As a person that collects antiquities, let me tell you, I know how much BS flies through the rubber claws of acquired in a private private collection. So I understand that provenance is a rubber clause. And just like you learn in business school, if there was any one effective way to measure the value of a business, we would all use it. But there's not one effective way. There's 10 different ways to evaluate a business. So there's 10 different ways to evaluate an artifact. When you have massive forensic evidence, provenance becomes less important, but awesome. And I think you really need it all. So we're really only one primary source away from some receipt of some daguerreotypist in 1840 whatever saying, oh, I went to the home of a strange and odd man with hair claiming to see angels and took a picture of him with his wife named Ema. You know what I'm saying?
I know Ema.
Yeah, so okay.
So one thing, I have always kind of been a couple of steps ahead of where the world was when I was examining technology and utilizing it to my goals. So it's not new for me to be out in front of people and people, shooting arrows at me. So, but the thing is it really doesn't matter what he looked like. It's fun, but to me, during this process of examining Joseph and Hiram, I learned a lot about them. I did a lot of historical research. I know a lot about who he was, and I love him more for who he was, the human side of him. So to me, it became less and less important for me to have a photograph other than, hey, it was neat. And then when I was younger, hey, aren't I cool that I actually did this? But what was more important is the man, who he was, what he did, and what we know him for, and what God called him to do. So why don't you show the image that I have on my screen right now?
Okay.
So we had an artist paint a picture of Joseph from all the evidence of what we put together. And then there's also a painting of Oliver Cowdery. Here sits before you the two first elders of the church.
Wow. Okay.
Never, ever been seen anywhere. Now, that's from the help of Photoshop. I put that together. And Joseph's holding the Book of Mormon, and Oliver Cowdery is leaning on it thinking,
Did Oliver Cowdery ever betray Joseph Smith after all was said and done?
No, he left the church out of some disagreements, but he came back just before his death, went out towards Utah, got rebaptized, and then died shortly after that.
Huh. Okay.
And claiming his faith and his belief in Joseph Smith and the church that was now underneath the leadership of Brigham Young.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, because I remember hearing somebody say that the only person that never betrayed Joseph Smith actually was Brigham Young.
Yeah, it was Brigham Young. So Oliver did lead the church for a while over some things. So show the picture up again.
I hit it right there, there.
So Oliver is leaning on the Book of Mormon saying, oh, drat, I never did get to try to do any translation that worked out of that.
Okay. Bro, that was it.
Yeah, but he was one of the other people besides Joseph Smith that got to hold, handle, and wear the Urim and Thummim and the interpreters. He's the only other person that did that. They don't really talk about that, but he was given the opportunity to translate, and Heavenly Father told him what he had to do, and he just really wasn't up to that spiritual level to do that.
Wow, hardcore. Okay. You know, it's so interesting. I've always said that, you know how you say like technology overrides provenance, which I don't think is a fair statement, but we get the gist of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To me, Joseph Smith was such a great person, and like my personal testimony has been so much based upon how much he forgave.
Right.
Like, holy crap! Like, I couldn't do it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'd freaking burn half of Nauvoo to the ground after what they did to me. You know what I'm saying? I feel like
he forgave the people that tried to have him killed and sent to the Liberty jail.
Yeah, no, it's absurd how much that guy forgave. I'm like, you cannot see somebody divinely acting. You know what I'm saying?
And I know there's a fact that he forgave the woman with the strippings out of the milk.
Oh, goodness gracious.
You don't know that. You're making that up, Shannon.
Yes, I am.
You've been waiting for that all day, haven't you? Okay.
Yes, I have.
Well, guys, let us know what you guys think. We want to keep this conversation going. Do you think that our boy here, Shannon, do you think he's wrong because he's overlooked the obvious likeness and image of this guy? Do you think that this guy right here is actually also this guy right here? That could be option B. Or do you think that just they're all wrong, this is heresy, and we should be called in and tried for our thought crimes in front of the tribunal of I don't know.
Take me home.
Take you home. Awesome. So anyway, let us know what you guys think in the comments below. If you want to support the channel, please don't forget to buy a shirt. And if you are a person of means, please consider a contribution through Zelle. And as always, it's been real and it's been fun and it's been real fun. For this and more, please make sure you check us out at WardRadio.com.
Glory, 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 rain down on me. Glory, 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 you're
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Before you go, please make sure that you like the video, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please let this be the video in which we earn your subscription, and that you press the alert button so you're alerted to all of our fun live streams and standalone videos and community posts. Also, if you'd like to help us out, please consider joining the channel. Members get all kinds of cool perks and benefits. They get early access to a lot of our videos and special emoticons and emojis during our live streams and preferential treatment there. It's a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, we have a super cool Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, check us out on WardRadio.com. There's a link to the Discord there. Also, you can sign up there for our newsletter. Our newsletter is a lot of fun, and you can put your email address in there. And if you'd like to contribute to the program, please consider looking us up on Venmo or on the Cash App. We're on both of those platforms. Also, if you just want to keep watching more content, right about here and probably right about here are going to be some more videos. Please check those out. And as always, for this and more, please make sure that you look us up and check us out at wardradio.com.